Michael, thank you so much for doing this interview with me, especially because I know you're on a very busy schedule touring around this great province, especially because what you're doing is something special, is something unique, and it's a celebration of music, of one of the greatest artists to ever step up in front of a stage, David Bowie. What is this exactly? People are going, okay, you just mentioned David Bowie tour. What's going on here? What exactly is happening?
So we've got a show we call The Bowie Lives, and it's a histography. We start at the beginning with Space Oddity, we roll to the end with Lazarus, we do everything in between, omitting a few, there's only so much time in a set, and we're touring around the theaters in Ontario doing this show.
Why did you decide to create something like this, especially when we're talking about a legend like David Bowie? And I don't know if there are too many shows like this.
Yeah, there aren't a lot of Bowie shows. He's got big chops, so that's, kind of keeps it down. Plus the music, the production, the playing within the band, it's very challenging. So you have to find a really, first-rate band to be able to play this stuff. I started loving David Bowie in the early 70s. When I was a kid, I bought my first Bowie record, and then all through high school sang Bowie, went to the streets and was a busker for years singing Bowie on the streets. By the late 80s, I had a Bowie show called Changes All Bowie, where I did 8 costume changes and had scrims and projections, and in the day, of course, we were using gobos and, for anybody to show your age, old stage lighting. And then I came off the road for 30 years, started a business, had a family, did all those things. And then, of course, and I came back out about 5 years ago, and I was singing Bublé and Sinatra and started making my way through theaters. And then David passed in 2016. And had a lot of calls knowing that I had a real affinity for the guy and would I be willing to put a show back together. So after about 8 months of interest and really kind of coming to grips with whether I wanted to do it or not, I didn't want to feel like I was being opportunistic about it. Guy meant a lot to me, developed a lot of characteristics in my life from having watched his career as a young guy. And so now it's all about bringing the spirit of Bowie back to the stage and trying to inspire people, as I say, to find the Bowie in themselves,
What is it, do you think, about his music that has resonated for so many decades? I know for myself, the first time growing up seeing him was on Soul Train. And I thought to myself, wow, this is interesting because anybody who knows Soul Train back then, very few Caucasians were on it. Him, Elton John, Casey and the Sunshine Band, Average White Band.
Right.
That's it,
right.
Back then. So you knew that was something special to have him on a program like that.
Yeah, no kidding. He did Young Americans. One of the greatest things about Bowie was how he just reinvented himself through fashion, obviously. His mentality and his approach to things always stayed the same, it seemed. But he was great at finding great players and surrounding himself with great producers and great guitar players, and then they would really help shape the sound. So in all cases, he'd go from being a rock performer to a soul performer to a, disco Nile Rodgers album to Trent Reznor, Nine Inch Nails. All the sounds are there. So that's hugely inspiring for a player, a musician.
But he didn't emulate anyone. You go through all his music, you can't find that he went, oh, well, I'm going to this is what's going on, I'm going to copy this person. He always did his own unique sound.
Yeah, he did his own unique sound. But, I mean, sure, he did cop the sounds of other people. It just might not have been the most popular performers on the planet. The whole Berlin period, he's working with Eno and Fripp, and those guys, they just weren't super popular, so people wouldn't recognize the sounds, and then he would take on their affectations. By the time he gets to Let's Dance, obviously, picking up Nile Rodgers, he's going after a big disco sound. I was, the hottest producer at the time, blah, blah, blah. So, but he just knew how to surround himself with really interesting people and then put his own spin to it.
Are we going to see these changes in your show? I mean, Ziggy Stardust to the disco, the things we saw in the 80s and leading right up to his passing.
Well, musically you get them, and then I don't do the costume changes. I do an iconic blue suit, and again, my show isn't me trying to pretend I'm David Bowie. My show is about me talking about the influence Bowie had on my life and the influence he had on the culture. In terms of the costumes, Marcella Lukianchuk, she's the costume. She's modeling on stage and doing some singing as well, and she comes out and does the Annie Lennox so that we do the Under Pressure as the Freddie Mercury tribute show. And she dresses as a Ziggy, she dresses at the Thin White Duke. We're working up more costumes for this year. So we're bringing the fashion to the show. And then, of course, we ask people in the audience to dress up as their favorite Bowie because there's so many iconic looks. So, we get people not only showing up with their T-shirts on, but, once in a while we'll get like fantastic Ziggies or, we roll into Niagara Falls again. Last time we were there, we had an amazing Labyrinth costume show up. So, we look to other people in the audience to evoke the spirit as well. Yeah.
People should realize too, because we were talking before this interview, your last show was sold out. So we know tickets go very fast for this. What do you hope fans will get from this experience? And I'm not just talking about old school fans, but I'm talking about new school fans as well who are just being introduced to David Bowie.
Yeah, well, everybody's got a favorite Bowie song, I mean, even the young kids who've picked up Black Star, have something I can identify with. Often get people coming up to me after the show and saying, I didn't know that was his song. A Man Who Sold the World's a great example where everybody thought it was a Nirvana tune. Even my guitar player thought it was a Nirvana tune till I introduced, it years ago when we started the show. But I can tell a really touching story quickly from the last show was I had a young girl come up to me. She probably was in her early 20s, and she had tears in her eyes. And she told me that her father had listened to Bowie, was a huge Bowie fan. And so she grew up listening to Bowie, and her father had just passed. And she came to the show. She had never seen Bowie. She was like, this is as close I imagine I'm ever going to get to this experience. And all I could think of was my dad throughout the entire show. And I mean, she was just weeping. And, it's stuff like that where that the guy's music touched so many people, as many artists do, in the world. Bowie was just such a class act, I think, that people identify with him in a very different way, in a very personal way. And I know I did throughout my entire life. So that's why I decided to come back out and do it, was not to... People say, would you do a Bon Jovi tribute? The answer is no. This is the only tribute I would even consider doing in my life, yeah.
How do we get tickets, social media, the whole thing? How do we keep in contact with all this? But again, most importantly, getting tickets.
Yeah, well, tickets, you go to the website, I guess, for the Seneca Queen Theater. I'm not sure what their web address is, but just Google them. They're in Niagara Falls. With us, we're the BowieLives.com. Our hashtag is the Bowie Lives. We're at the Bowie Lives on all the social media platforms. And then certainly we're promoting all our shows and posting pictures of fans and videos from the show. The other thing I'd like to quickly touch on too is there's a film being made. A company called Velvet Orb Films has been following us around for the last year, filming shows, doing interviews with fans outside, the promoters, that sort of thing too. So that's at the Bowie, that's beingdavidbowie.com. So you can see outtakes that he's started to assemble there and slotted for maybe the fall of 2020 or the indie film festivals for 2021 with that show.
Okay, well, look, I got to break out my double-breasted suit for this, and I got to get ready for you to perform Golden Years. You're going to sing Golden Years?
Am I singing Golden Years? Okay.
I'm holding you to that. Either way, I think it's going to be an amazing show. Thank you so much for doing this interview with me. But more importantly, thank you for bringing back this great artist's music.
Well, thanks to all the fans for coming out to the shows and certainly, keeping the spirit of Bowie alive.